Welcome to Women Together. My name is Antoinette, and I'm your host for our sessions. I see that many of us are still coming in, so just making space for all of us to come together and enter into the room. So warm welcome, whether you've been with us week after week or you've just started for the first time. Maybe a friend told you to come on in and join. It is a joy to be here all together. We have been gathering for the last few weeks, months. I feel like it has been years, but I feel like the last few months have felt like years. So it's just wonderful to have each other. And just a little background information, just in case anyone is new. I'm doing my little gallery view. So if you click on the top right corner, if you're in Zoom, you can see the gallery. Sorry. And you can just say hello to everybody and give a little wave. And if you're on YouTube, you can give a little wave, but I'll just wave to you here. And yeah, it's just a real joy to be together and be coming in from all of these different places and spaces that we may be coming in from. So whether you're in Zoom or in YouTube, you can write into the comments in the chat a hello and just say where you're coming from. So I'm standing here in Westchester County, New York, and I see we have a couple of us, at least from this area of the world. I also see Pennsylvania, Texas, Ohio, Virginia, Southern California, Maryland. Wonderful. We've had quite an international group as well, but it is really wonderful to see us coming from all different parts of the United States and from Spain, Madison, New Jersey, Phoenix, Arizona, Philadelphia, Minneapolis. So it's just a wonderful time. We spend an hour together today and each week to just land together in our own bodies and in ourselves. Initially, Eileen Fisher started this community to just bring women together and go a little bit deeper. So Eileen Fisher is a clothing designer and has created clothes that allow us to feel comfortable and confident in ourselves. And this kind of community space is just dropping us into a place that's a little bit beyond the clothes. So allowing us to feel free and comfortable and confident in who we are. And I think that is so important these days and, has always been important. But I think also for women to be able to really step into who we are and connect with the universality of our personal experiences of being human on the planet. So there are some tiny practices that we do to land us here. There are many of us who get the opportunity to go on a retreat, and we can spend a month in silence or a week in silence, or maybe even just a couple days, in a workshop or dancing together or whatever it is. And there's this kind of feeling of feeling free and elated and sort of, just kind of ready to take on the world and ready to be in our lives in a different way. And it's kind of a refresh or reset button. And what Eileen wanted to do is take these tiny practices that would allow us to have that feeling in any moment in our lives. So wake up in the morning, how can I have that feeling of refresh, reset? If I have an interaction that I'm struggling with, how can I have the refresh or reset so that I am coming from the best possible place within myself? So that's really what we do here. And it's only an hour, but it really is this little moment of kind of waking up to something. And today we're going to have Hillary Ray with us from Tell Me a Story. And she's been with us before, and we're just so glad to have her back with us to be sharing her experience and practice with us. It's been really fun. And I'll tell you more about her in a little bit. But before we go over to Hillary, I thought we'd just do a moment of stillness to land us here in our bodies and ourselves, connecting in with this group of over 100 women who are just kind of being here in our bodies on planet Earth together. So I have a little chime. It's actually a singing bowl, but it's a bell that will allow us to just mark the moment of being in stillness and following the breath. So you can tune into the breath a little bit more than maybe you already are. Get both feet flat on the ground if that's comfortable for you. And just feel into the breath and the body. You can lower your gaze or close your eyes. Just feeling the connection to the earth, connection to the sky, perhaps a heart connection to the 100+ women who are in all of these different points across the US, across the world, who opened their computer, their iPad, and came and sat down here together. I'll ring the chime to allow you to have a moment of just connecting into the breath, and I'll ring the chime to bring us back. So perhaps you want to just squeeze your shoulders up to your ears. I saw Anne rubbing her hands together, whatever's going to bring the most energy for you this morning or afternoon, as the case may be, wherever you are. And just being with the body and the aches and pains and the little things. It's getting colder here in New York, and I can feel my shoulders starting to creep up as they do in this time of year. So whatever you're carrying with you, maybe just do a little release, squeeze the shoulders up, inhale, and then exhale, release them down, shake it out. Beautiful. So I would love to just, if you feel comfortable writing in the chat or in the comments, what is coming up for you about what brought you here today to this conversation about owning your story. And I'll share the Brene Brown quote that went up on the Women Together social media this week. And it's that owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing that we will ever do. And I have been thinking a lot about that, in that, what does it actually take to own our stories? So I'm really looking forward to being with Hillary today. And also, I'll read out before we go into this conversation with Hillary, any of your thoughts. So Mary's sharing that stories are what we remember. Pamela, when I share my story, people tell me to share more. Courage, curiosity. I would also say that owning our stories, truly owning our stories, invokes a sense of compassion and really understanding. So, common humanity, acceptance, connection. Francis asked me if I share my story out loud. Often I do, and I do it here with all of you in different ways, but more and more. Kathleen hopes to write a book to share what led to a mission to develop a new tea and dialogue relational mindful practice. I look forward to reading it and learning more about it. Megan shared self-critical. Sherry, my family always kept secrets, so I eventually became a stand-up storyteller so I can give the legacy to my children, allowing me to have a voice and connect with others. I love this. Jane shared, success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. Jerry, perspective. Sharon, life is a series of stories. When I share my story, I get to hear yours. I love the brave aspect of sharing, practicing daily kindness. Beautiful. Thank you all. And, please feel free to keep sharing some of those intentions that you have. Rewriting my story so I'm a victor and not a victim. Beautiful. Thank you. So these are so powerful, and thank you for sharing them. So just to bring Hillary in as a reminder, for those of you who may not have been in the session that Hillary joined us in last time, she is a stand-up comic and won a Moth Story Slam. She also does storytelling in the workplace. And she's really just an expert in using personal experience to build trust, inspire, and help people understand each other. And Hillary, we're so grateful to have you with us, and just had such a wonderful experience the last time you were here, diving into storytelling techniques to be able to give voice to those stories. Because I know that I often struggle not only with the kind of vulnerability it takes to share my story, but also the how. I kind of want it to be wrapped up nicely, and that helps me own it. So I know it doesn't have to be perfect, and that our imperfections are beautiful, as Katie said, and I also would love to have some more techniques. So glad you're here with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be back here. I try to attend these events as much as possible, and so I'm just grateful to be here and to share with you all. And so for those of you that I didn't meet back in July, I'm Hillary. I'm the founder of Tell Me a Story. And back in July, I took everyone through an exercise which I consider a foundational launch pad of storytelling called the 5-word life story. And that, I think, can really give people a sense of what it is to take ownership of who we are and what we do and what we stand for in a really simple, beautiful way, but kind of also in this vast way that maybe it's like, well, what do I do with this now? Besides going up to people and sharing 5 words about myself. So I love this theme of owning your story. And I have a couple guiding prompts that I would love to take everyone through in a moment. But at first, I would like to share a little bit of how I came to my own idea of what owning a story is. So it's a little bit meta because I do run a business around storytelling. And that came from me telling stories from my life on stage, at first at comedy shows, and then at open mic storytelling events and other curated storytelling nights. But when I really went all in with running my storytelling business, the first year I was in business, I was doing a lot of corporate training. So going into big companies and teaching storytelling as a communication tool, as a leadership tool, as a team building tool. And I felt really good about what I was doing and really excited that I was going into these spaces. And to me, it felt like, oh, I had this like weird little secret that I wanted to share with people. But I think I was going into that a little looking back, half-heartedly. Like I was simultaneously giving them my expertise and what I believed in, but then always worrying about if that was right, if that's what they wanted, if that's the type of storytelling that they think they need. And so I started to doubt myself a little and kind of not take my stand on what it really does mean to own your story and all of the tools needed to do that and to communicate your story. And so there was one corporate workshop that I was invited to speak at, and it was organized by the company and an event organizer. And the event organizer had done a lot of research, had put Googling, into Google how to tell your story, and had come up with this printable PDF that was a list of tips for how to tell your story. And when I show up to this event, the table is set for all of the attendees. There's a notebook, a pen, and some other little accoutrements. And then there was this printed PDF of tips on what to do to tell the best story or the most effective story. And I quickly scanned that list of tips before delivering my presentation and what I believe are the best things to tell your story. And I didn't agree with half of the things written on that paper. And there was someone else's company name at the bottom of it that was the source for this information. And I wish I could turn back time and in that moment say, I took a stand and said, you know what? Throw out these cards. This is not what I'm teaching today. This is not what I believe in. But really what it did after I left that presentation was I thought, what do I believe in? How do I want people to take ownership of their story? What are the tools that people need to really communicate who they are in an authentic and impactful way? And so I created my own list of tips, which I have available to all of you that I'll put in a link at the end for you. And these are what I think are some guiding key elements for personal narrative. And number 2 on that list is ownership. So the theme for today was perfect. And instead of diving into all of the key elements, I'll make sure that you can grab this PDF and print it out for yourself. But I'd really love to focus on ownership and guide you through some prompts around that. So that's a story of me taking ownership of my work and my expertise and, for lack of a better word, authority on something that I stand for and believe in. And in me sharing that meta story about storytelling to you now is me taking ownership of what happened in that experience and my perspective looking back on it and sharing it in a way that I think feels good for me in the moment, that maybe I left that presentation grumbling that I wasn't being taken seriously, or that someone else got the credit for the things I wanted to teach, or, all of those kind of negative self-talk things that could have happened after the fact. But having time and perspective on it really helps me to see that I can share this story to talk more about what I believe in. And so that's an example, I think, of taking ownership of choosing the lens that we're putting on our narrative, and not to hide anything or mask anything or manipulate the person listening, but to really understand, who was I in this story? Who am I now? What perspective do I have? And what journey do I want to take people on to share more about who I was and who I am now telling you this story? So I hope that makes sense to all of you listening. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part is owning that we are all human, that we all, like, nothing in our lives are perfect, fairy tale-esque. Some things might be, but taking ownership that if there's a moment in our life that we want to share with someone else, if we don't like who we were in that moment, there's still merit in sharing that, because you can share it saying, hey, maybe I didn't like what I did then or who I was then, but I like myself now, or I can see I've learned from my mistake. And again, it's adding that layer of perspective and taking ownership that way. So that's what I'd like to leave with you as far as the definition of ownership. Be the main character of your story, embrace your perspective as the storyteller, and trust sharing who you were in the story as you remember it and as you want to tell it in this present moment. And so I'd love for you to think twofold, and I'll ask each prompt. I'll write the prompts in the chat, and then I would love to move into breakout rooms to have discussions around these prompts, but I'll go slowly to make sure that everybody has them. So the first prompt: share a time, if you have one, where you feel that someone else told your story for you. So share a time, or think back to a time in your life where you feel that someone shared your story for you. How did that make you feel? So I'll give a quick anecdotal example of what this prompt means for me. So I was in 7th grade I loved clothing, which is perfect for me to be a part of this group. But at the time, my love of clothing meant that I wanted to wear all vinyl. I had a vinyl dress, vinyl pants, vinyl platform shoes. I wore a lot of silver spandex, faux fur. It was the mid 90s, and I was really into just outrageous, outrageous fashion. And everyone knew this about me, friends, their family members, my family. And so I'm over at a friend's house. We're hanging out in her room, and her mom comes to the doorway with a friend that I didn't know, her mother's friend. And they're standing in the doorway, and the mother's friend is saying hi to my friend and making small talk. And the mother introduces me and she says, "So and so, this is Hillary. She wears trash bags," and starts laughing. And that little moment stuck with me for years and years and years. And to me, that's a story that someone told about me, because she saw my vinyl dress and thought it looked like a trash bag and thought she was being funny. But to me, that vinyl dress was so much more than a vinyl dress. And I was at an age where I was still figuring out who I am. And to have that little voice say, "She wears trash bags, she wears trash bags," it can really impact you and it affected me in a really negative way, until I could take ownership of my fashion choices as a kid to my fashion choices now and what that says about my identity. So that's a little example of what that means, of a time when someone told a story for you, and how did that make you feel? And there's a chance that it could have made you feel great. So having that as a conversation in the breakout room as well. The second question is, share an experience of a time where you shared your own story and took full ownership of it. How did that make you feel? And if you haven't done that yet ever in life, or you don't think you have, how would that make you feel if you were able to do that? So those are the two questions. Share a time where someone told your story for you. How did that make you feel? Share a time when you were able to take full ownership of your story and share it. How did that make you feel? So I will put them in the chat, but I would love to move into breakout rooms and oh, thank you, Antoinette. Antoinette will put them in the chat. And I would love to move into breakout rooms to have a conversation around these two prompts, see where it goes, and then come back and have a continued conversation about ownership.
So for YouTubers, if you're on YouTube, you can take this moment to journal about those two prompts, and we'll put them in the comments. And then when we come back, we can continue the conversation together.
And so the second prompt, share a time when you were able to tell your story with full ownership, and how did that make you feel? Yeah, we will join breakout rooms in a moment. There will be, I believe, something will come on and prompt you to move into the breakout room. There was a question here about that.
So if you are on YouTube and journaling, hopefully you found a piece of paper or a journal. The key to journaling is just keeping the pen to paper. And I'll just repeat the prompts just in case. So the first one was share a time when someone else told your story. How did that make you feel? Just writing down whatever comes to mind. And then share a time when you were able to tell your own story with full ownership. And how did that make you feel? So just taking a few moments to jot down your own um, thoughts around that and just connect in with your own story. And if you feel comfortable on YouTube, you can start to put your thoughts in the comments. And Hillary, I'm just curious, you shared a little story about your own childhood and someone else sharing your story. Do you have just for the YouTube folks, any thoughts on the second prompt when you had full ownership?
Yeah, I remember a moment now, a handful of years ago, where I was actually sitting in the audience at a Moth Story Slam in Brooklyn. And I think at that point it had been my eighth or ninth Story Slam that I had attended, and this was before you could get tickets in advance, where I stood in line for hours working on my story. I put my name into the bag and my name was never picked out, because in those instances, you never know if you're going to be chosen to tell your story. And so it was April Fool's Day. I don't remember the year, but I was sitting in the audience and my name got picked out. And I was ready to tell my story. And it was a story I had told before, but I got up on stage and immediately felt this listening audience that was so invested in being there and ready and open to hear what I had to say, that I let go in a way that I had never let go before, where I had told a story I had worked on, but I allowed for all of these special moments to come through that I was only shared with that audience, and feeling it wasn't that they laughed or gave me a high score or anything. It was that energy in the moment and that exchange. To me, that felt like I fully owned a story that I had been telling and it had been working for me, but it felt freeing. It felt powerful. It felt like, oh, what if I do this in everyday communication? How can I do this off of this performance stage? So that's that example. And then I did win that slam, but it didn't matter. That wasn't for me. I mean, maybe in that moment I was very excited about that. But looking, my perspective now and my ownership I'm taking on the story now is that it didn't matter. It was the other stuff that mattered.
That's amazing. And it's amazing how it also freed you to start your business and to build that for other people too.
Yeah, I'm learning that all of my stories are now stories about storytelling. So,
Oh man. So, it's just fascinating because I think it's so easy to lose that sense of ownership of the story. And I saw someone had put in the chat in here that my story can be uncomfortable for others to hear. And I resonated with that immediately because it's like, unless someone wants to hear the story themselves, like unless they're like, oh, tell me this story about blah, blah, blah. I like, I'm not sure if it's the right time to open up about a story or if it's the right space to share. And, do they really want to hear it? Even when I would do like poetry readings or something, I would say like, are you ready? Like I'd ask people, because in some way I felt like the listener has the ownership, so I'm just curious how you've dealt with that.
It's the trust that it's a gift, that your story is a gift. And this is actually you touched on two of the other key elements in this 5 key elements list, but the idea that storytelling is reciprocity. And so I have something from my life that I want to share with you. I'm giving this to you, you're receiving it, and I don't know how you're going to receive it, but I trust that so long as I own it, however you receive it is going to work out the way it should. And you're also, by giving your story as a gift, inviting that person to think of what stories they have to share. And I think someone mentioned something like that in the chat, that it's inviting other people to share their story, whether they have the voice to do it then or later. And then this idea of scars over wounds, which I think speaks to what you just shared. And that's the 5th key element of, there are life experiences we all have that might still be in wound phase, and that we can check in and wait until we feel they're in scar phase to feel ready to share them. And that might shift on who we're speaking to, how much time has passed, perspective, all of that. So I think both of those things kind of allow for that trust in ownership, and that no one can take your story from you.
Yeah, I think that's the key to the internal confidence, that ability to then be able to say, no one can take this from me. I own this. And like, I'm just thinking about that moment where you decided to put your name in the hat, so to speak. How did you make that decision? How did you kind of anchor yourself in that?
I don't think I knew. I just knew from the moment I started telling stories on stage, which the first time it was at a comedy show where I brought my own laugh track because I didn't know how the audience was going to respond. And I had a friend, I said, hey, can you push the button on this CD player? I believe it was at the time of like when to laugh. And that became part of it. But I think from the moment I did that and figured out, oh, I wasn't really telling jokes, I was telling stories from my life, I just knew that this was what I was meant to do. And in that stage of my life, I felt I was meant to do it as a form of entertainment, but I soon learned it was so much more than entertainment. So I think I just had no other choice but to get on the megabus from Philadelphia, go to New York, stand in line, put my name in the bag. And on those times when it didn't get picked out, it didn't matter because I heard 10 stories, and being on the receiving end of those stories was so valuable and so special. And I think that's, again, that reciprocity, that it's the storyteller giving your story, but receiving stories is a gift as well.
Also that one thing that strikes me too is this chord of, oh, it's not just for entertainment. There's something really powerful about this. It's going to impact other people, in a way that's not just like, haha, laugh at this. So I think about that too it's sometimes easier, it feels easier if I can just say it and people just laugh. It's, we don't need to go there. And I'm curious how that shift has been for you. How have you gone from that kind of entertainment um, to more, I don't know, meaningful storytelling?
Yeah, I think, and this is a stage I'm in now that I've been in, but not consistently, is purpose for the storytelling. Why am I doing this if it's not for entertainment? What do I want the listener to do once they've heard their story? Not that I'm going to tell them to do it, but if there was like a internal call to action, whether I voice it or not, what do I want them to do? Or what message do I want to convey without hitting them over the head with that message? Or how does this story align with what I stand for? Align with, yeah, what I so urgently need to communicate. And I think that's the difference. And I think that there are stories that I've told for entertainment that can still serve that, still have purpose in this new context. And then I think there are new stories that I don't know if I would ever tell for entertainment, but that I can be more intentional about using. And so the brainstorming actually opens up a little bit wider. And then for me, humor is one of my personal storytelling ingredients. So I think that's always going to be there, whether there's a more impactful layer or not.
Amazing. Yeah. I feel like that's yeah, again, it's like this, what I just hear from you is this sort of deep confidence, this kind of like, well, I'm just going to tell it no matter what, and be with that. So, thank you for modeling that. And when our Zoomers come back, I think we're going to give them 4 more minutes
Great.
to just be together and give them enough time. I hope that we can share some of that with
Sure.
them too. But it's just this like, do you do a practice to cultivate this kind of confidence that you carry with you all the time, or how do you maintain it?
The practice is trusting. Well, I have this whole storytelling process that I do and take people through, but it's the letting go in the moment. Um, that's what, to me, yeah, cultivates what I think is a sense of freedom, or I guess, like, to me, it's internal alignment. And so maybe that's being perceived as confidence. Like, I still get scared being in front of people, not to the extent that I used to. But to me, it's, am I all there? Am I ready to go? Let's go. And then trusting it and being in the story. And so when I help people find that for themselves and identify what that feels like for them, it's that like being on the ledge and then like flying, or sometimes I say bungee jumping or skydiving. I've never done either of those things, so I don't really know what it feels like. But to me, that's where you find it, and then it's easily replicable and doesn't take as much push.
Mm. It's interesting you mentioned skydiving, and then I was thinking, because I have gone skydiving, and I was thinking about what that was actually like. And I think that's probably because for me, it was like I made a mental decision. My body was like, nope, we're not doing this. But my legs were like, mm-mm. When the plane door opened, it was like, that's not how this is supposed to go. And then all of a sudden, I'm jumping out of a plane. And so I think it just, when you say that, it's that was not physical alignment, but it was, my desire with my mental alignment, sort of triggered the courage. So I hear that. And I was just thinking about, what does Eileen do? And I talk often about that in the Women Together spaces, but she talks about wiggling her toes, and it's like,
Mm.
that brings the polyvagal nerve online, so it's all of a sudden wiggling the toes. It's like, oh yeah, I'm here, the like waking up the brain, waking, like coming back into the body, feeling a sense of the spine, feeling aligned to the, and then I can speak whatever it is that needs to be spoken. And yeah, and I just am going back in my mind to the listener piece. I know we have about a minute left, but I'm just thinking about, do you consider the listener when you're placing trust in them, but do you consider, like, are you kind of landing it in a field, or are you kind of like, this is what I need to share?
It's a little bit of both. I would say when the majority of my communication and storytelling happened live in a room with other people, that often happened very quickly in the moment. Like, I could sense the energy in the room. You just can feel like if people are with you or not, and that could sometimes, without, like, I wouldn't let go of the trust of myself and what I wanted to share, but it could steer the way I wanted to get them where I wanted to get them. But yeah, a lot of the work that I do and that I help people do, work on story first for story's sake and get that aligned with you and your purpose. And then there is a little bit of considering of audience, but not in trying to predict what they're going to think about you or your story, because that's impossible and that's a waste of energy. But yes, if it's like, I want to communicate this very specific message, how do I make this story do that? Or what's the story that will do that for me?
Mm, beautiful. Well, thank you. And I hope
Yeah.
our YouTube fam got to enjoy that little background combo. And to our Zoom folks, I think everybody is just jumping back in the room. So welcome back. Welcome from all of your Zoom rooms. I'm in the gallery view again. So it's just really fun to see the smiles and the kind of energy and light of people who were just in a breakout room. So we kept our YouTube family on today and had a little background chat. So if you've been in Zoom and you want to check it out, it's on our YouTube channel. And so Hillary and I are just having a little chat about storytelling. But in the meantime, we'd love to just share a little bit of a dialogue. We'll say goodbye to our YouTube folks in about 5 minutes, but before we do that, just some sharing, maybe even across our YouTube and Zoom channel. So in YouTube, we had someone share about her own story and her own experience. And I just wonder if there are more comments in YouTube that want to come through, feel free to put them in there about sharing your own story in a time that someone else may have shared it, or that you may have been owning your story. Or if you also have any questions for Hillary as well. And then again, in Zoom, if you'd like to share in the chat, and you can also raise your hand with the raise hand function. So clicking on participants at the bottom of your computer screen, there'll be a little blue hand on the right-hand side, and you can raise your hand and we can bring your voice and video in across both of our channels. So before we do that, just sharing the piece on YouTube is someone shared with us. I had someone say my hairstyle was aggressive and it made me take a step back. I felt and feel that my hair is an expression of my personality and that I am and can be assertive and I move with purpose. And I think that was a really beautiful just description of what happens when someone else tells my story versus, you know, when I'm telling my story. And Hillary, I wonder if you want to share anything before we go into the hearing from the groups, but anything that comes up for you about that.
Yeah, I mean, I love how quickly that turnaround was in how you shared that in the comment of, this is what someone said about me. This is actually what this part of who I am means. And that you sharing that was so much more wonderful and captivating. And I want to know more. And so I think that idea, that little taste of, if we focus on the stories that, and I think I talked about this a few months ago as well, if we focus on the stories that we want to give to other people, that it is this, I am sharing my story with you, that is a gift. If we focus on that versus focusing on either self-limiting internal narratives or those external voices trying to tell us who we are and what our stories are, if we focus on that third one, the what do I want to share with other people that I own, that no one can take away from me, then the little voices that are external and the little voices that of self-doubt internal will eventually dissipate or quiet. And so I think that was a great example of how that shift can really do that.
Thank you. So Sherry raised her hand, and Sherry, you're going to be sharing in Zoom and YouTube land. So I will put you on spotlight just so you know that's happening. There you go. And you can unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. I live in New York City. And what I shared was at age 7, actually my first day of elementary school in Lynn, Massachusetts, I met an older boy in the playground. We were introducing ourselves, and the minute he heard my name, which at the time was Goldberg, he yelled out at the top of his lungs, "Sherry is a dirty Jew." And I believed it. And I became so ashamed of who I was. And this went on for 40 years. And the change occurred, the transformation occurred when I was living, believe it or not, in a Buddhist retreat center in Barnet, Vermont. And it was a Tibetan holiday. And we were in the kitchen, and the chef was Jewish, and he decided to put on klezmer music. And the next thing I knew, I started dancing, and I started to realize all the things that I loved about being Jewish. And then to top it all off, I became a stand-up storyteller, and I was able to tell the story to an audience with the transformation that occurred. So grateful, very grateful. Yeah, it was wonderful, wonderful to be able to transform.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for sharing that story. And I know that you're getting a lot of support from the community in the chat and in YouTube as well. So just really wonderful to share that personal experience. And, you know, really just what we all go through, that those stories can last when they're told for us, that they can last for a lifetime. And we might not even realize it. And I talk a lot about my mother's voice being in my head. I love my mother so much. And yet her voice is sometimes in there, and I don't necessarily realize that I haven't been telling my own story, you know, that it's something that someone else, you know, may have created for me. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Laith, I'll pass it over to you. If you can unmute.
There, I got it. Thank you. Somebody in the chat made reference to Hillary's 5-word exercise, and I just didn't want to miss an opportunity to learn from Hillary as well as this beautiful group.
I can answer that. I believe there's a recording available of when I came here in July, I believe, on YouTube that I'm sure can be shared with you. And then I can also share you. I had a link for that PDF that I can put in the chat as well as today's PDF so that you have both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Wonderful. So with that, I think we will just thank our YouTube channel family for being for watching with us today, and just grateful to a couple people who also wrote in the comments, and someone shared that she finds that individuals are not open to my story because they've created their own story for me. And I think just, you know, recognizing that that resonance is landing there too. And someone else said that her property manager called her and said, "You have to pick up your packages from the mailroom. You're taking up too much space." So I think these stories can come in from anywhere. And it's about really how we own our own stories of what we're hearing and what we're sharing, and also cultivating the inner confidence and the trust that maybe Hillary can share a little bit more about with our Zoom room who may have missed it. But so we'll say thank you to our YouTube folks. We'll stay on for another 10 minutes with our Zoom room who are in breakouts. But for those of you on YouTube, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. So with that, we close our YouTube